Hi, and welcome to Rule of Carnage. This is a video series, a podcast, a YouTube channel where usually myself, Glenn Ford, has conversations with this guy who has returned to us from the wilderness, Mike Hutchinson, and lovely that this week we will be having such a conversation. So one of the things that has been happening in Mike's life recently is, as viewers of the channel will know, he has gone through the process of launching a Kickstarter, namely Mike Hutchinson's Hobgoblin, which went rather...
I didn't come up with that part of the name, by the way. The marketing engine decided.
Mighty quick to say that. And I think it's been an interesting campaign, and specifically I think there's a few things that sort of come up that I would like to ask Mike about, and so I'm going to ask Mike about them now that we're sat in front of a recording camera, and hopefully some of the answers will be of interest to other people.
Perfect.
So the first thing I'd say, and I don't want to be like, overly sort of attacking your legendary humbleness, humility. There you go, that's the word I was reaching for, humility. But Hobgoblin got 1,234 backers.
Yeah, I'm very pleased with that.
Which is a lot for an indie book-based minis game. So for reference, some ones have been a free season. Battles of Valerna, designed by Alessio Cavatore, 561 backers. War Surge got to 967. Relic Blade's highest backed sort of campaign was 885, and usually they come in like close to 400. Those would be the comparable sort of indie war game books on Kickstarter, and clearly Hobgoblin did considerably better than all of them. So I mean, the first question there is, did it surprise you quite how well Hobgoblin did? And I want to sort of be not overly, no, it didn't surprise me at all. If anything, I'm shocked at how poorly it went.
So viewers of the channel will know that this is my first Kickstarter, but Glenn has done many in the past and is a bit more of an old hand. So I think, Glenn, I didn't have any expectation of what this was going to do in my mind as it was starting. I think I've got two numbers in my head. One is roughly how many Gaslands books I've sold, which is quite a few, and roughly how many A Billion Suns books I've sold, which is significantly fewer. And so I guess I felt like the low bar being the sort of opening 3 months of A Billion Suns. I'd like to get somewhere around that. That was an Osprey promoted book, so it had the buoyancy of the visibility through Osprey's catalog, but it was also in the nuclear winter of COVID, and people were probably spending a bit of money on books, but they weren't really playing new games with their friends. So I'm really pleased with the number of people. I don't really know what I was hoping for, and I guess the big question is really, is 1,200 people who then all of those people get the book, some number of them properly ingest it and maybe figure out how to play it, some smaller number then actually play it with their friends, and some smaller number of that manage to infect those friends and convince others. And once you get down to that final group of people, is this a big enough community for the game to sort of get some oxygen, and how much more would be needed? And I don't know the answer to that. So that I think is going to be really interesting to see whether this game sort of gets enough oxygen from those initial backers to kind of achieve some level of liftoff. And the liftoff for me is very, I've got fairly moderate hopes for it here. I would like it to do, sort of A Billion Suns level of good, which is, it's providing a niche that's an alternative to all other games, and is doing it well. But I hope that as people get that and it spreads, that it then has a slow build like Gaslands did. Perhaps not to Gaslands level, because it's a much more crowded area. I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't know is the answer. I'm really
yeah.
excited to see how it falls out.
I mean, it's interesting because it definitely went to sort of the upper end of what this sort of project does on Kickstarter. Very,
Mm.
very, very much so, I'd say, and sort of the upper end of my sort of expectations for it in terms of backer numbers. And I think it's one of these things where it's like, obviously Kickstarter covers, your printing costs and your distribution costs, and in many ways is like possibly a sort of proof of following for hopefully Gregory from Lecty Studio is going to be looking at some level of distribution, and it's getting that out there into sort of the wide world. And obviously
Yeah.
the Kickstarter backers can be cheerleaders and sort of community sort of hubs, but fundamentally it's like it's getting the book in a place where when somebody hears about it or a backer tells them about it, they can walk into their friendly local gaming store and pick up a copy of Hobgoblin or something close to that, or go on, even if it's just going online and finding it on not just your website but like Amazon or whatever it ends up being.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's I think it's hopefully it's sort of going to be like I say, because it's on the upper end of what those things do. Hopefully it will give Greg the tools to go to stores and go, this thing has done really, really well in this place. You should want to stock it. It has a market, it has an audience. So the follow-up question to that I was going to ask was going to be, what do you ascribe the success to? So whether there's something that you think, because like something I've been saying in a little bit in the Discord, in relation particularly to Battles of Valerna, is that I looked at that website, that Kickstarter campaign, because I do the Kickstarter roundup, and it wasn't until like the third time I scanned down the page I went, hey, just a second, that's Alessio's name. What's Alessio's name doing there? Because they mentioned all from the creator of other like Lord of the Rings. I was like, well, I wonder if it's some random like fourth name on the Lord of the Rings credits, somebody where you have to go, oh yeah, I remember him. I wonder which person who worked on all these games it was. And then it's just buried in one of the paragraphs. It's like, oh no, it's the guy who
it's like 6th edition Warhammer, bolt action, Kings of War. Like, come on, he's the guy, a busy guy. He's a serious dude.
And I honestly think like that they definitely cost themselves a level of backing from the cognoscenti.
Right, they rather buried the lead. Yeah,
I think so. Especially it's like you scan, so on that campaign you scan all the way down to like the team where they got photos of everybody and their names, and he's not there. They just haven't put his photo up and his name up in the team. They've got like the mini sculptors and things like that. And I honestly think, in my personal opinion, and not to sort of swell your enormous noggin any, I think Mike Hutchinson's Hobgoblin had an enormous amount to do with the fact that it did better than I would have expected. I think.
I don't know if I could turn that into a repeated sort of book titling format without it becoming a bit weird and annoying. But it does make it clear that that I think that like some people knew my name from Gaslands and followed me across from trusting, feeling like they trusted that there was probably a fun game here if it was anything like as sort of jolly as Gaslands is. So I think I ascribe the success to that, plus the decent sort of community building stuff that was going on. We had a slightly less successful Facebook than I have in previous times, but Discord really, like, it's probably there's probably an element of like what I'm seeing and sort of observer's bias, but like it's also because where I am is where I'm doing the most work. And so I used to spend a lot of time in Facebook. And so having spent time in Facebook groups, those groups seemed to flourish. I'm currently spending way more time in Discord for various reasons. And so I'm not ascribing the success to there. I just think what I want to say is I feel like miniature gaming is moving a bit to Discord, but I think that's a bit of observer bias based on my own current behavior. I think that Discord is growing and it's now starting to compete with Facebook groups in terms of their importance. And so that's interesting because now there's two places that you have to manage, but also two places where there can be cross fertilization quite easily, because it's quite easy to move from group to group inside Facebook and from Discord to Discord inside Discord. So I think that it's also like people were attracted maybe by the name, and then had a little look and it looked like it was fun and there were people about to have fun, and so that kind of sealed the deal for people.
Yeah, because I do think that sort of a miniatures agnostic and a sort of genuinely miniatures agnostic mass battle tabletop war game, I think is a tricky sell, frankly, on Kickstarter. I think that
on Kickstarter, right?
Yeah, you know, it's a thing that doesn't say, okay, look, here's a rule set attached to this range of lovely miniatures, because Kickstarter's a very visual medium, and not being able to have like a bunch of sexy minis to show people, I think is tough, because it's quite sort of conceptual in like, no, it's a book with some rules in it that you buy and then you play a game. I do think that Kickstarter is definitely moving. Kickstarter projects are moving towards Discord and away from Facebook generally. I think that's something that's interesting. More and more Kickstarter projects are saying, join us in our Discord, when they used to say, you know, join us on our Facebook page or follow us on Facebook. I don't know why specifically that is, but it's definitely.
I mean, I just feel like this is a sort of like, this is just sort of a gamer culture or a nerd culture sort of gentle shift here, which is like Facebook's been declining for ages. Like it reached in shitification quite a long time ago, and people are quite bored with, you know, the emotional experience of that platform. But Discord's like, it's needy and it's noisy and it's confusing and its notifications are irritating, but at the very least it's like not jam-packed with people trying to buy your attention. It's just filled with like other nerds shouting at each other.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I never really did Facebook. I was never on Facebook, and I'm on sort of multiple Discord channels. So
sorry, before you move on, I think there's a third answer to the question of like why I think it did well, and I think it comes down to this is sort of a hope, and I think maybe a sort of maybe like a signpost for me in the future. I think that what Gregory did with the sort of branding and the look and feel of it, and I did with the sort of like I don't know, like the flavor and feel of it, is kind of important, because like if you think about wanting to use all of your models in a big battle game, there are a couple of, you know, truly miniature agnostic rules sets, including Kings of War, although there's factions in Kings of War, but like the true sort of comparison and competitor is ironically Dragons Rampant, which you know was the one that stopped me getting picked up by Osprey all those moons ago, because it was just about to come out when I sent them Hobgoblin. But the thing about Dragons Rampant is, not only is it an Osprey Blue Book, it's got kind of a jolly, homely, slightly old-fashioned, like, I'm not putting Dan Mersey's style down at all. Like he's got a very nice touch, actually, I like the way he writes. But it's I think Hobgoblin sort of shot out the gate just with a bit more like sort of cartoony heavy metal-iness, which appeals to me, and therefore other people who were attracted to dumb stuff like that were like, oh, it's like a game that I can play with my models, but it's like slightly more zab zab zab. And so I think that did like that pulled people over the line of like, oh, this kind of feels a bit different, you know. We do, like, other people asked me during the Kickstarter about it, like we live in a post Merkborg world, and so like things that are sort of feel more like they're the merchandising stand of a rock group now, kind of that's a more appropriate and welcome framing for a game. Like, you know, you're equally inspired by, you know, sort of things like Dungeon Degenerates, which feel like, you know, they're very much drawing on like screen printing posters from, you know, bands in the 90s and stuff. And I think that feeling gave it something for people to go like to get excited about and be like, oh, this isn't just a normal boring game. This is like a cool zab zab zab.
Well, I think it's funny because we were having a conversation like the other day about the move, like for example, the move in painting from like heavy metal sort of sharpness back in the sort of 80s, 90s, and the red period of GW, over to sort of this grim dark, you know, sort of lots of washes and murkiness we've had for quite a while. And I keep hearing people saying, I've just had enough of Grimdark. I've just had so much enough of Grimdark. Everything has been Grimdark for like the last 10 things. Non-GW stuff has all just been Grimdark. It all has to be that. Can we do something else now? And that, you know, the Mort Borg is sitting there with this sort of bright yellow and black sort of death metal thing to it, going, this isn't a minis game. And it's interesting for me that Forbidden Psalm is very, I still feel quite very grimdark when there's some pictures of the minis and things, while sort of taking some of the aesthetic for the book. And I think it's time for somebody to start going, yeah, okay, we can move away from that aesthetic and we can do something else, and things can be bright and mad and, you know, something else. And sort of,
I was watching another YouTube channel, maybe we'll link it down below, we probably will forget, but Rogue Miniatures, I think is her name, and she was painting these very old squats, but she's painted them all in these like crazy sort of 80s album cover, like really high contrast sort of gradients and stuff. And it's such a shocking departure from what you tend to see right now. But yeah, I mean, I guess the broader point here is like having a strong visual identity, having a strong like brand identity. You know, it's like music in this way. It's like it is art, but it's also art that needs like an exciting, you know, subversive packaging around it. And I think that, like, you know, it's fun. It was fun at UK Games Expo having people come out of the toilet and the first thing they saw was this sort of black spiky black metal word that they couldn't figure out, and then a massive like hobgoblin holding a blooded axe that was way too big, and people they just genuinely stopped and they were like, well, what's going on here? This is interesting. Many of them not even miniature gamers, and then moved on. But the point was, it was eye-catching, and that I think is, you know, much to do with Crom's art, which is, you know, Crom's art is incredible, but also to do with, you know, Gregory's, he's a professional brand dude, so like obviously he knows what he's doing, and I want to kind of learn from this experience and focus on that, because I think it's interesting and important.
Yeah, absolutely. So tracking back a little bit, I think definitely there's a good deal of people who followed you over from Gaslands to Hobgoblin. And I think we were expecting that, you know, you were expecting that to a certain degree. I've been quite surprised, like particularly on the Discord and things, quite how many people are popping up who have no background in like miniatures, like mass battle games. Not like as in, you know, oh, when I was young, I played a bit of Warhammer, or I've seen Warhammer, but people who have zero understanding of like what a movement tray should look like, or things of that nature. I mean, it's for me, there's been that's been quite surprising. I mean, have you been sort of a little bit sat back?
No, this didn't surprise me at all, because like the death of Warhammer Fantasy Battle killed rank and flank movement trays and pushed them into this super niche that, like, sure, Kings of War exists, sure, Ninth Age exists, but these are like tiny player populations. I mean, honestly, I don't know what the numbers for Mantic are, but I'm really surprised about, like, you know, that range continuing to sort of grow and splurge in the way that it does, because it can't be selling that many games to support like a giant manufacturing thing. But a lot of people play round base Age of Sigmar, like obviously that's, you know, that's the huge public GW company supported a way to play fantasy games, and so people expect to play, you know, skirmish games or really big skirmish games, and I think that the square base movement trays had become very much a Grognardian sort of artifact of the past, And so you know, I think like almost the length of time it took for Hobgoblin to come out was kind of an advantage in a way, because to a certain group of people who are coming over from like, you know, Gaslands and the Osprey thing is like a skirmish game world. They're coming across from a skirmish game world and going, "Oh, what's this cool looking indie game?" And then discovering that, you know, it has lots of models on single bases, and it's sort of like, you know, bringing movement trays back and making them, you know, bringing them, you know, necromancing them back up. So I don't know. I guess I like that, and I think the other thing about this is, and I don't, you know, I want to make sure the rule book is following this, but like, I think it's also important that the rule book doesn't assume too much about, you know, you have touched one of these games in the past. Because I've been reading a few rule books recently in a different genre where, like, so I've been reading some OSR rule books, and as Glenn and I were chatting about earlier today, like I've never really played Dungeons and Dragons. I've never really played dungeon crawling other than loads of Hero Quest. So there's a bunch of tropes and assumptions around that mode of gaming, that there are certain rule books that I pick up and I can't parse because I'm missing some fundamental like baseline assumptions about how the game is supposed to function, which aren't written down and communicated because they're just assumed. And so I think with Hobgoblin, like there's a version of Hobgoblin that I wrote many years ago that just assumed you were already playing Warhammer Fantasy Battles and therefore knew all the rules. And this was sort of like a drift from that shared starting point. But I think, yeah, it's important to sort of note, and it didn't super surprise me that there are a bunch of people who are like, oh, square movement trays, this is intriguing.
Well, because it's funny because one thing that seems to have been like maybe a default human assumption is that things will be square, that square is a natural shape. If we've got like, you know, a form of parallelogram, it'll be a square one. Whereas the assumption for, like, for example, for narrow units, the assumption is that they'll be thin and long, you know, and that's sort of the idea of writing it. And sort of there have been people popping up going, okay, well, it's got to be this thin, and obviously it's got to be square because all things have got to be square, and I can't fit any minis onto this thing.
Oh, right.
and just no. And I think there's somebody popped up in the Discord who was like, would it be allowable for me to like do it like narrow but quite long behind? I think I've come up with and it's like, wow, that's what we assume.
Yeah. Like Grom the Paunch doesn't fit on anything other than that. That's what Grom the Paunch goes on. Obviously, that's a chariot base. Yes, I've put a lovely picture in the rule book now to try and communicate this.
Yeah, because it's like accepting and understanding that maybe people are coming not knowing what a movement tray looks like, and then learning what somebody who doesn't know what a movement tray looks like does when you give them the information of, okay, frontage this, length that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I guess is intriguing about this is, like, I haven't played a bunch of it, but I played a bit of Total War Warhammer here and there, and like that much more feels like you start with Warhammer Fantasy Battle units, you click over there, and then they just turn into Age of Sigmar, like, you know, chaotic, not like things that are roughly clumping together, but then when they get into melee, it's all a mess. And it looks cool. It looks exactly how you would want it to look. But it also, I think, means that those people who maybe have been playing skirmish games are interested in this, and the only thing that they've got in their mind as a comparison for these mass battle things is like, oh, so it's going to be a bit like Total War Warhammer. It's like, well, yes and no.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm genuinely curious because obviously, you know, I haven't done massive, you know, mass market research into these things, but at the same time, GW is sort of bringing back the Warhammer Old World, and they presumably have done some kind of mass market research into what
I understand it's like an Andy Hoare sort of passion project from Forge World, so I don't think it has to prove return on investment. I think it's just like Forge World gets to do some Grognardian stuff. That's fine.
So look, you know, given if we agree that sort of maybe mass battle, rank and flank, square movement trays have been a bit out, and Goblin has performed above expectations on Kickstarter, you know, is there a responsibility? Do you maybe feel a responsibility in leading a new sort of era or community of people into, what is the sort of quite storied and well respected part of the hobby, and saying, here's this thing, you are the breaker of a new frontier to a wide-eyed and adoring tribe of followers. Does that fall on your shoulders in any particular way?
I hadn't considered myself in this messianic role.
I always consider you in a messianic role.
Yeah, sure, why not? Let's hope so. Let's hope that of all the things that are coming out right now, Hobgoblin is the funnest looking and the best to play, and therefore people grab it and go, holy crap, this is fun to play with square bases. Then maybe I'll get Alessio to write a couple of army books for it.
I mean, you have led a significant number of people into minis gaming. I mean,
from Gaslands.
Yeah, from Gaslands. I constantly have people coming up to me at conventions, either saying Gaslands got me back into playing miniatures gaming. I'd stopped for ages, it totally ground me down, and Gaslands got me back in. Or saying I never played a minis game before in my life, and now I'm a minis gamer. And now you're, the guy who did this and brought these people in is going, hey, there's this thing of mass battles and movement trays, and the most mass battle version of miniatures gaming. It's not sort of a skirmish thing with 5 minutes. It's like, no, the mighty sweeping battle lines.
I mean, what you're really, really making me want to do is find some way of getting Greg to put 2 armies in a box and make it like the Battle Masters box set that like many of us in the 90s learnt about, mass battle games because of Battle Masters from MB and GW.
There is nobody who doesn't want Hobgoblin Battle Masters. There's not a person who understands any of those words who doesn't want that to happen. So
just writing that down.
So Hobgoblin was like the first thing you ever showed me that you designed many moons ago, before Gaslands.
I found I was rummaging through some old folders here, and I found a folder of notes for Hobgoblin from that time, and there's as there was in this era, there's a stapled like scrawled handwritten lined pages from Glenn, and I think this was the first time you provided me feedback on anything. And it opens, I can't remember exactly what it says, but it basically says, you will find a lot of very aggressive sounding commentary in this because I have found some problems. Some of this is just my preference, some of this is some significant in-game problems, but anyway, it's more coherent than anything I've written, so hugs and kisses.
Yeah,
it was nice to discover.
That sounds about how I introduced myself to you. Because it did have the whole reversing at speed thing going on. But
yeah, right. I gave you the rule book, and you were like, "I'm pretty sure I can teleport 54 inches across the battlefield by pivoting backwards." And I was like, "What?"
Yeah, there were some genuine issues at that point. But so this is the thing you showed me before Gaslands. It's a project nearly a decade in the making at this point. And that from a fast moving, fast iterating designer, which is what you are, firstly, how does it feel to see something that you've been working for that long actually going into the world? Because I know a lot of people watching this have things that they've been working on for like a decade or something, and it feels like it's never going to get out there. How does it feel to actually finally have it have happened?
It feels great. I will feel even better when we get the like early access PDF in people's hands, and then when I'm holding the thing in my hands, it will feel even better. But I tell you what, the moment that I got really excited was we went to UK Games Expo, and I brought a small demo table. I didn't demo it a ton. I probably played 5 demo games with people. But one of those demo games was with like an 11-year-old girl, and she was like, "What is going on here?" And I explained to her, and she was like, "Right, let's play." And like, it was like those moments with Gaslands where you explain the rules, they get it, and then they have an amazingly good time. And this girl just absolutely loved the like smashing the armies together and was like, wow, this is wow. And like that was like, yes, like you're the 11-year-old version of me, and like, yes, this is why like pushing little armies together is exciting. And that obviously, like, the rules were simple enough that she was just able to grok it really quickly. And then I played with like a pair. I guided a pair of like proper, 30-year-old dyed-in-the-wool miniature gamers who knew their onions and were well used to all the things. And I walked them through the game, and they both played either side, and they were like nodding appreciatively and going, "Oh, yeah." And so I think more than anything, demoing it rather than even like releasing it on Kickstarter, actually demoing it out in the wild and seeing completely random people in stressful environments enjoy the game made me feel really excited about the fact that I'd spent so much time on it, and the things that I was trying to achieve with it, people were like, because I talked to a lot of people about it, explaining it to it, a lot of people were sort of shouting at me why this game was a good idea, and they were saying the things that were exactly like what I hoped was going to be true about it. Like, yes, I've got armies and I want to be able to play them, and I've got units that are always rubbish, and I like games that take 60 minutes rather than 3 hours. And
yeah, so I guess the last sort of thing I want to say on this is, and this is, I'm gonna phrase this as a question, but in many ways this is a statement to a lot of people who are probably watching, and that is that, so Hobgoblin has been rejected in its lifetime. I think more than once. It just did very significant numbers on Kickstarter. It just did very well, just because it got turned down, and it got turned down, by people who are supposed to know what they're talking about, doesn't mean that there isn't sort of a market for it, and it isn't very popular, and people aren't liking it, and people aren't walking up to us at conventions already and going, why didn't this exist 5 years ago? Well, we tried. So the thing that makes that statement into a question is, do you feel vindicated by quite how well it did on Kickstarter versus the people you offered it to and went a different route?
No, and this is my growth mindset at play here. But like, the thing we just launched on Kickstarter is just oceans better than the thing I demoed to people 6 or 7 years ago. And it's not that I've been working continuously on it for all that period of time, but I have been working on miniatures games continuously for that entire time. And so as I step back and look at the thing that I've created now, like, it's just so much more cohesive and coherent, and all of the flappy bits have been carved off, and like every part of that game I have tried 7 different versions of, and sometimes even come back to earlier things. And I remember thinking at the time that I put it down, it was probably about a year away, and it turned out it's probably more like 2 years away. But like, I don't know, like, the thing was being interviewed by another channel with Greg on the line as well, and as I was telling the rejection story, he was like, well, the fact that it was rejected by every other publisher makes me feel really good about the fact that I decided to publish it. Crumbs. But like, it wasn't the same game back then. It wasn't as coherent and as cohesive. So yeah, I think if I feel vindicated in anything, it's continuing to work hard on things until they're good.
Yeah, and I think ultimately I want to sort of say that as a message to, I know that we've got viewers, and I know that we've got people who have put stuff out there and had it rejected, and I know specifically that we've got viewers who work on things for years and then get to that point of going, I'm insane for working on this, I shouldn't be trying it, I should just bin it, this was a total waste of time. And I always try to say, no design time is wasted time. You become a better designer. I don't think you could have written this Hobgoblin 5 years ago.
No.
I don't think you had the confidence in what you were trying to do, and the sort of the ability to chuck out the extraneous stuff and say, this isn't really my idea, this is an idea I got from playing this thing or that thing.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, honestly, it made me really excited to return to Gaslands as well and be like, wow, what could I do with Gaslands next time round?
And on that note,
but that's a story for another day.
on that note, I think we'll sign off this conversation. I think it's been lovely chatting about Hobgoblin. I think that there's sort of, yeah, I think there have been interesting things within the campaign, you know, separate from the game itself. If people are interested in Hobgoblin watching this channel and somehow haven't seen the Kickstarter or backed, I will put a link through to the late pledges page from on the Lecty Studio. If you have backed Hobgoblin, if you are excited about Hobgoblin, please drop down in the comment section, let us know. Mike likes to hear nice things about the things that he has done. You know, if you've got your own theories about the way that Kickstarter is moving a little bit around social media and possibly why Hobgoblin did the numbers it did, I'd love to hear those theories, because you know, sometimes Kickstarter is a bit of a coin flip and it's interesting to get people's take on it. While you're down there making some comments, you know, hammer the like and subscribe buttons, because I like seeing those numbers go big. Swing by the Discord. If not by the Rule of Carnage Discord, swing by the Lecty Studios Discord, where there is a Hobgoblin channel, and talk about Hobgoblin. I'll put as many links as I can get my grubby hands on down to the comment section. But from us for now, I think this is going to be a thank you and goodbye from this episode of Rule of Carnage. So thank you and goodbye.
Tell me which armies you want in the Hobgoblin Battle Masters box set. Down below. Bye.
Bye.